jump right in. We will be recording exactly, and I'll come to the logistics in just a second. Because time is always short, let's jump right into the content. So today we'll be discussing the EUDR. As you'll probably know, the European Parliament and Council formally adopted the EUDR on 29th of June last year. And the EUDR will apply to products imported into or grown in the EU market after 30th December 2024, so only a few months ahead from now. The EUDR does require that any operator or trader who places commodities like soy, beef, palm oil, wood, cocoa, coffee, rubber, or derived products on the EU market or exports from it must be able to prove that the products do not originate from recently deforested land, nor have they contributed to forest degradation. Collaboration will be a key aspect to support companies through this process, and sustainability standards will continue to play an important role in this journey. Developing a strategy to comply with strict EU standards for commodity trading is essential. By skillfully using appropriate tools and methods, companies can not only comply with legal requirements, but also drive global sustainability initiatives. In the ever-evolving regulatory landscape, it is crucial to stay up to date and adapt strategies which emphasize the importance of promoting responsible commodity trading in our collective efforts against deforestation. In this webinar, we will discuss key recent developments, initial insights into implementation trends, system customization, and the need to develop robust traceability system and approaches to avoid risk and occlusions. We will have two speakers today. Hannelore will start, if we will see if she has joined in the meantime. She will address current dynamics at the EU level, some lessons learned so far, and ongoing studies and mappings. Josh after will continue and provide us an overview of the impact of EUDR on sustainability systems, road trends, and how they are adapting. He will also cover some of the outstanding ambiguities that ISEAL identified, such as acceptable uses for reporting in excess and the role of controlled mass balance systems. But before we jump into the great presentations, I would like to inform you about the logistics of the webinar today. So you have been all put on mute in order that we avoid any background noises disturbing the presentations. But we will have a time for Q&A at the end, so don't hesitate to share your questions, ideas. You can use that during the webinar by adding your questions, or at the end by raising hands. We approximately will have 5 to 10 minutes for that. All questions that we will not be able to answer will be answered after via mail directly. And also important to mention that the webinar recording and the presentations will be shared after the webinar. So before we start with the presentation, just a very brief overview of ProTerra for those that are not familiar with our work. So we are a non-profit organization that promotes sustainability at all levels of the feed and food production systems, and more also in the beauty care products sector. We own and continuously develop ProTerra Standards, global multi-crop sustainability standards that cover all crucial areas of responsible supply chains. Some figures will also be shared after the webinar. I'm not going to take more time with that. I put also in the slides the soy certification numbers, updated also including 2023 numbers. Those are also relevant under the scope of the EUDR and may be of interest for participants today. Another important field is sugarcane, which is not yet under EUDR. However, there are going to be revisions every year, so additional products or also ecosystems may be added later on. Benchmarks have also been added. This is interesting for those who use in their supply chains ProTerra systems. We have updated those for the new version of the ProTerra that has been published in January this year, and also for the new standard, the monitoring and verification standard. You can find the links and read the details by accessing these on our website. So, and as always, we cannot do this alone. Collaboration is of key interest and importance in all the preparations towards EUDR and other sustainability challenges. We have a list of new requirements coming up, be it on carbon, deforestation, legality. Yesterday, there have been also new regulations confirmed by the Commission on Forced Labour. So we have a lot to address and discuss. Today, we will be focusing on the EUDR, and I hope that Hannelore managed to connect in the meantime.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes,
thank you.
Thank you. Great to have you here. Hannelore is an agriculture economist with long-term experience in the political economy of food markets. She has done field work and consultancy also in value chain development in Africa and Southeast Asia for international organizations and universities for more than 30 years now, and she has lived also 9 years in Africa. Today, she works as an advisor on global commodities to the European Commission, and particularly in coffee. And she facilitates the working stream on policies of importing countries under the Coffee Public-Private Taskforce of the International Coffee Organization. And she also supports the EU delegations in coffee-producing country in the design of support programs for sustainability in the coffee sector. I'm delighted to have her here today, and Hannelore, the word is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Emese. Sorry that I'm a little bit late in the meeting. We had the Cocoa conference in Brussels where I also had to speak. So, and the traffic was terrible. But thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the time of the whole audience. There's a lot of people here. I will speak about the EUDR mainly and a lot from coffee perspective. I'm in contact though with the other sectors at the EU level, so much of it can call reflections or can be a reference for other sectors. Let's quickly go into the points that I would like to address. I would have liked to talk about the new guidelines that are in the make on the EUDR today, but they are not ready, nor are the frequently asked questions that would get an update. So I would like to explain a little bit what is happening at the EU side now from the different perspectives that I can see. I also think we do have some first lessons learned on this implementation or preparation of implementation of the EUDR, which I would like to bring up and which can lead to interesting discussions, I think. And then I think it's I owe you some ideas on what's going on for studies and mappings that might be interesting for some of you or might give an example to some sectors if possible. Thank you. The current dynamics in the EU, I will look at the perspective of the different stakeholders that I see, again, inspired by the coffee sector, for which I facilitate several public-private platforms at a global level, but also at the regional level. What guidance can we still expect from the European Commission, and how ready is the EU? Then a third point, what is there for global and regional support programs by the EU? Remember that is one of the articles in the EUDR that there would be support. What do we see today? What is there? And then clearly the balance sought today. And I mean today is really literally today, between the opportunity of the EUDR, the visibility of implementation, what's happening in the market, which is also important for the EU, and the inclusiveness aspect for SMEs in the EU and for smallholders in the EU and outside the EU in partner countries. Good. For the perspective of the different stakeholders, when I look at the partner countries, meaning in this case, these are the producing countries of the commodities or sectors or products that are included in the EUDR, we see some progress in well-regulated sectors. For example, the cocoa is quite well regulated. There's government intervention in the producing countries, in many cocoa producing countries or in the main producing countries. We see that, for example, in coffee in Brazil, Colombia, Costa Rica, where the deforestation, but also sometimes the coffee sector themselves are well regulated, that there's progress, meaning that the traceability is on track, not finalized, but is on track. That the deforestation check, which is, according to EUDR and FAO definitions, is also being updated compared to their own deforestation checks. We also see that in sectors with large-scale farms, it goes easier, obviously, than in the sectors with the smallholders, or where in sectors where there's a lot of smallholders. There's also some countries that have signed up to facilitate a declaration in excess at a national level. We will come back to it. That means that you almost have a territorial approach, although I don't like to use that word, and I will explain why later. But the ones that have a declaration in excess, meaning that they declare all what goes out from whatever plot in the country of the product, for example, of coffee, would be deforestation free. They guarantee that, and they give all the polygons and all the geolocations of the plots of this commodity in the due diligence statement. Of course, they also have a small advantage compared to the others for the EUDR. Maybe not so much for pure traceability of the farms, but of the plots. Sorry, but they do have an advantage. They're getting ready. If we look at how many farmers are really geolocalized and traceable, then the majority of smallholders is not yet geolocalized. Depending on the sector and on the region or even country, we reach maximum 50%, but very often it's lower. Good, so that's the partner countries, not yet ready, but some are getting ready. So there is hope that it can be feasible. The member states in the I'm not talking about who pays, so that is another question. But we see progress. The member states in the EU have woken up, and you're all aware, I'm sure, that this also applies to them. I'm thinking of beef that can be exported from the EU. I'm thinking of hides and skins in terms of handbags and shoes that are exported from the EU. And there's other products, of course. They're waking up now that this also applies to them, which has to be applied to them, because otherwise the EUDR could have never existed according to WTO standards and principles. And they protest. It's mainly the ministries of agriculture that are protesting, and also the commissioner of agriculture is protesting, asking delay and also some changes in the EUDR because of the heavy weight for also smallholders in the EU, the administrative weight. So that is also playing. So this is playing on the background, and certainly is also the reason why the frequently asked questions haven't been updated yet. Because now they also have to make them for the EU member states who are waking up. I will, in another slide, I will speak about the readiness of the competent authorities. So first we talk about the stakeholders themselves that have to implement, being also the agricultural sector and the industry, of course, in the EU member states. They also protest. Private sector, and I'm sure many of you can speak better than I do, it's very diverse. For the coffee sector, it depends on how directly they're dealing with farmers, what is happening. So in coffee, when we have the traders dealing directly with farmers, if they really deal directly with farmers, they seem to overcome the challenge and seem to be able to make it traceable and deforestation-free, proven deforestation-free. But the value chains with a lot of collectors and informal players, intermediary players in the country, in the producing countries, still face a lot of problems. Yeah, so there's still the local traders associations remain greatly invisible, don't speak up really what is happening. So we assume they're in trouble. So we try to get into contact with them and to involve them in stakeholder platforms. But so that's, again, what was already projected, the long informal value chains remain a difficulty. And then there's also between the private sector, obviously there's competition. Most of them are acting on their own. But there's a real trust issue in data. Yeah. So if you buy a product from a trader, you can buy data on deforestation-free on a deforestation-free product, but the trust in the data is really a point of discussion. Yeah. So how did you really get it, your data? So within the value chains between the private sector, between the different parts of the value chain, there's also a bit of a war on data. Yeah? The price of data is going down. That I've noticed. In coffee, the price of data, according to me, it's gone down already by 10 times. Yeah, so it was 10 times more expensive a year ago. We also see an increase of direct sales, meaning that in case of coffee, the roasters are more present in the producing countries at different levels than before. Yeah. What do we see from NGOs? I think that's also an interesting one. Some remain very silent, seeing that how difficult the implementation is of a legislation that they really wanted as a breakthrough. So some remain silent. Others are really very active on insisting on its implementation and its timely implementation and on the no delay, which is also understandable because there are some opportunities, obviously, in the EUDR. What I hear from the other stakeholders is that the NGOs never come up with scaled and inclusive solutions. Yeah, so that many of them are still very loud on the implementation of EUDR, but it remains difficult also for NGOs to find scaled and inclusive solutions. Very often it's very local, small scale solutions. The markets, we're really getting a two-tiered market. As the UK is going on a very soft way with its forestation legislation, and as the US forest bill has not been voted yet, and the chances are small that it would really move, that's what I hear, before the elections. We're getting a two-tiered market, meaning we have some products that are EUDR compliant and some not, and the EUDR compliant one is more expensive. Yeah. This has certainly already and will have consequences for the EU market. Even though the prices of the data are going down, the products are more expensive. And I see also some good cases where even the farmers get a higher price for EUDR compliant coffee, which then would probably be something to be really made explicit that farmers can also profit from it. I don't see it everywhere, and I saw it in cocoa and coffee, so I'm not sure about the other sectors, but it's certainly something to be monitored, I think. There's a small margin still, even though the prices are going down of data, there's still a small margin gained on data. And for coffee, it's situated at the traders level for the moment. So they take a little extra for more than it costs them. Yeah, for the data, that's generalized. I'm sure there will be differences and variety in how much and what exactly, but that's the situation today, and it can change. Good, that's a quick thing. What is happening between all these stakeholders? You feel that it's very fluid, and that the EU policymakers, meaning the Parliament, the Council, and the Commission, is really in between all this. Yeah, and that in the Commission as well, the voices are not always as coherent. We were promised frequently asked questions. That's a FAQ update. Remember the last update we got was in December, which did bring some new elements, maybe not enough, but there were some elements new. They were going to give an update in March already. It's still not there. Yeah, I really think it's because of the EU member states themselves now waking up on implementation for their own sectors, not just for the import, and that they're first trying to integrate that in the frequently asked questions, and that they didn't get ready with it. And now I hear that it would be included in the guidelines. So there will come guidelines. And two main aspects of the guidelines will be on legality, which remains a challenge for all. Whatever method you use, whatever approach you use, whatever sector, the legality remains an aspect. Maybe you remember in the EUDR, some are very aware, some others maybe not so aware. There's two requirements. It has to be deforestation-free, your product, and you have to prove it. And you have to prove it based on plot information, so not even farm information, plot information where the product was grown. But secondly, it has to be produced and the value chain has to function in accordance with the national legislation. We will go into it in another slide, but it's important to see that this legality remains a problem. We are also stuck with the text, of course, yeah? So even if the EU would say now, oh yeah, but take it the light way, the legality, in the text, in the legislation as it is, it's very strong. Yeah. So and that is what the private sector will kept accountable for. You cannot change a legislation so easily. It's there. Yeah. So even if now the voices would be, oh, let's take it light, it's still in the EUDR. Yeah. A second one on which more explanation will be given is on agricultural use. Remember, deforestation is defined, amongst others, in a change of your land use from forest, first or secondary forest to agricultural use. Now, and what was already in agricultural use, even agroforestry, before the cutoff point, you can do with it what you want. It's not deforestation. But there's a lot of cases which are in the gray zone. I know of, for example, what will we do with fallow? It used to be agriculture. It has been 10 years not in agriculture, so it's become a forest. What do we do with that? Is it still agriculture or not? Is it agroforestry or not? Because the word use is then, it's not actively used. There's also questions on, for example, eucalyptus plantations. If you cut them to plant other trees like cocoa or coffee, is this now deforestation or not? And this is quite an accurate question, which has still not been replied, and which they promised to reply in these guidelines. Yeah. So I can also not answer all the questions because it is a gray zone, and it's not. You can't find it in what we have had as guidance up till now. The Commission also, DG Environment also said, so conversion is not in scope. Let's keep the questions for after, and I'll rush a little bit more, okay? But Emese, can you see the questions in the chat? We keep track of them, huh? Yeah.
Absolutely, and we have a Q&A session at the end.
Yes, okay, but let me go on, otherwise I'll get stuck in timing.
Your time. Take your time.
So they also promised to make a template on the due diligence statement, although they've always said it's up to the private sector, the operators and the traders to come up with a due diligence statement, because the situations are so different on how you would, the due diligence statement has to have a declaration, but it also needs a risk assessment. Yeah? So how do you do that? What do you write in there then, even if you have the data? So they would give a template. Yeah? So the promise is still up that they will do that. Obviously, everybody would have wished this a year ago, but it's still, the promise is still there. They're working on the information system. They've had a test with a panel of or a sample of private sector companies per sector. This was generally very negatively received by the private sector. The idea of the EU was to keep it very wide in the beginning, so that all type of different data formats would fit in it. But at the end of the day, I think the most important remark from the private sector companies who were so good to help in this test was that there's not an API, so the software can't speak to each other, meaning that you would have to introduce each geolocation or polygon manually, which of course is crazy, especially if you work with sectors with smallholders. So they're working on an API now, and they would not do another test again. Yeah. So, but they're working on it to get it ready. Remember also that the EUDR said that there would be a benchmarking in medium, high risk, and low risk the countries for deforestation. There's been a lot of discussion on will they do this before going into application, or will all the countries start as medium risk? Yeah, and the risk level has an influence on two things. First, on the frequency of testing. So there would be less operators tested, the lower the risk. Yeah. Which was a significant difference. And also the ones that would have low deforestation risk from the start, the countries with low deforestation risk, they wouldn't have to make a risk assessment, which is also a serious difference, of course. Well, officially, they haven't said that they wouldn't do it before the going into application, but of course, the clock ticks. Already, if you see the methodology that they would use, they would start with the general, looking at the general risk for deforestation in a country, and then have the ones that in general have high risk for deforestation, according to the definition of the EUDR and FAO. They would go in dialogue with them and look to what extent this risk is really linked to certain sectors or certain regions, or how the risk is being lowered already today by certain regulations or actions from the government or private sector. This would be a negotiation. And personally, I don't see how they could still do all this before the going into application. So even though there's no formal announcement that everybody would start at medium level, it starts to look like that. Yeah. There's still a lot of questions on a reference map for each sector as well. A reference map, what do I mean? What was the forest situation and including the agroforestry situation at the moment of the cutoff point, so the end of 2020, in a detailed way. For some sectors, the GRC map, so the Forest Observatory map, which is based on a resolution of 10 by 10 meters with not too many other layers of information, is not sufficient. You can, for certain sectors, not use it to distinguish forest from agroforestry, which is a necessity. So it's also not an obligation to use it, but it means that there's not one joint map by the sector or by EU accepted as reference point. And this is really a challenge for the implementation. Yeah. So I think we would have wished that it exists, but there's no perspective for that. Then there's, of course, a challenge with the capacity of competent authorities. Most countries have indicated their competent authority. Not all member states of the EU, we have 27 member states, they haven't all indicated the competent authorities, which is, of course, was one of the articles of the EUDR, that the competent authorities would be in place. So there's pressure on them to do that, but they haven't done it. Also, we see that in many cases, obviously, it's a Ministry of Environment or a Ministry of Forestry, which are not the biggest ministries, which have certainly very competent people, but a very limited number of people, which don't always have the same level of accuracy in their maps, in their forest maps, which very often they each use another one between member states, yeah, and the accuracy is often lower than what we find in the private sector, so they don't feel very confident to do the checks themselves or to redo the checks themselves of the shipments and the operators that they would check. So already it seems that for the competent authorities, they will rather look into the systems that are used by the operators, yeah. So I also feel that they are very interested in all the mappings of what is available of systems, what is available of maps, how can a protocol of a private company look like? So they're also searching. That is my conclusion. I cannot say that no one is ready. The people that work in these ministries or agencies are very competent, but they're small. They don't have that much budget available today to do the checks, and they lack very often the sufficiently accurate maps. Let's go to the next slide, and I'll try to go a little bit faster. Especially on this one. This one gives the global and regional support programs by the EU who are already busy or who will start. Let's say the last one will be in May. Yeah. This means I don't think I have time to go into each of one. Basically, they are good programs, but they will not cover the full sectors. That is clear already. And that's why I write in the right side, you also see the EU delegations. So that's like the concentrated support. That's where the massive support is present. So again, how and whatever possible, you need to contact EU delegations. So normally each of the producing countries has an EU delegation, and some countries also have a regional EU delegation. And that's mostly because the trade with these regions is very important. So in Brazil, we have a EU delegation that is looking after trade. In Colombia, we have that. In Central America, in Kenya for East Africa, and then we have one in Indonesia. These are really to be approached. Yeah. For the regional programs, we will have all of them, and you see the names in the right side, being presented in a Coffee Public Global platform on the 30th of April. So we have invited the coordinators themselves to come and explain what is going on, how can you be approached, what is still not allocated funding, meaning and how will this be allocated? Are there calls for funding? Can a private sector apply or not? Yeah, or does it have to be governments or farmers' organizations? So I will send the link to that meeting in the chat after my talk. Yeah, so and you can register to participate when you want. I try to save some time, but these are the regional and global programs that are ongoing. And then to the last slide on what is happening in the EU. I think these are the 4 type of aspects that are really weighed today to see what will happen. Will there be an official delay, and what could be delayed? Yeah, it's clear that, and you can also see that in the realities now, that there is a good opportunity of the EUDR. It is a wake-up call to companies, like you have to start to look what the effect is on deforestation. And there won't be any escape. And we see that companies, in fact, with all the challenges, they react positively. Yeah? They try to get things in place. They try to understand, or some had already serious commitments on no deforestation. But it's the last wake-up call, and it functions as a wake-up call. We're woken up, and I think the companies are woken up. And that is received also by the EU as very, very positive. Huh? So, but it is an opportunity. The countries are starting to wake up. I see positive impact on how the countries start their own legal framework for deforestation or registration of farms, on anything that is land use, related to land use, on anything that is related to how farmers approach to sell their product. Yeah, so in many countries, smallholders, the immediate collectors, and I don't want to talk bad about them because we need them so much, but they are not registered. They're not legal entrepreneurs. So there, they start to look at, how can we shape this value chain and support these without pushing them down too much. I think it is a wake-up call for countries to work on deforestation, but also to work on their value chains. We create a level playing field. So I think that is still a very, very much an opportunity in it. However, then the implementation. If we ask a full direct implementation now, can also give space to fraud, because, or a very hollowed implementation, because not all operators, not all and not all competent authorities are ready. If you push really for a full implementation now, you can de facto get a very diluted implementation of the EUDR, because simply it's like I said already, the geolocation of smallholders is so difficult. It's been overlooked. The realities have been underestimated, I think, or the difficulties of the realities for operators and traders. The complexity of the value chains of mixing products has been underestimated. So if you ask really direct full implementation, you will get fraud. The easiest fraud is overusing geolocations that exist. You say, oh, my product comes from these farms, and you can't check it anyhow. Your system is not ready in the EU. So there's so many easy ways for fraud that if you really ask a full implementation today, there will be a lot of fraud. Yeah, and you install fraud. So this is really also being considered in what will happen now the next weeks and months. Inclusion. For most sectors, implementation is possible in some more easy countries or well-regulated countries, or with the farmers that are organized anyhow in quite or certified anyhow. But what with all the others? So if you really want to implement full implementation in a very short time, well, yeah, then it will not be inclusive. Even where you find possible inclusive solutions, the solutions that are possible in a short term, they don't empower farmers. Or the awareness of farmers is not full. You do it above the heads of the farmers. Yeah. But then you can comply, but well, what do we want? Yeah. So the inclusion remains an aspect that is considered also at the Commission level. And then we have the market, of course. Yeah. So we have a two-tiered market. The volatility will probably increase, which is already not an ideal situation, not for the private sector, which is very important in the EU, not for the farmers, and not for the consumer, probably. So we already see, and I said that in the beginning, that the EUDR compliant coffee, and I'm only speaking for coffee here, is sold more expensive. Yeah? So there's a premium. But the premium doesn't necessarily trickle down to farmers level, although I've seen some good examples, so we can monitor that. But this is, in fact, what they're confronted with. Then the Commissioner of Environment says there will not be any delay. The ones that look more into inclusion say we have to delay something, you know. And what I hear is that they could look at delaying, but then still you have to change the legislation. So that takes time. But maybe the fines or the rejection of the shipments. So if you delay the fines and the rejection of the shipments, but you still ask a due diligence statement, as much as possible geolocations, you create more of a learning environment between the traders, the farmers, the countries, but also the member states and the competent authorities. So, but that are the things that are waiting. So what is moving where? Good. Let's have a look at what are maybe first lessons learned. I start immediately the process with producing countries. If we were to advise any other trade bloc or traders alliances, this process is very important and should have happened long before. Yeah, so to go to the producing countries, which provide our markets, luckily, and to look at what is the role of the government, what is the role of the private sector, because there's still a lot of confusion. And that can be different in different contexts, but that it's been discussed with the producing countries, and that there's a readiness plan available, made by the countries with their sectors to do that. I think we really overlooked this, and it could have prevented so much harm or challenges that we're facing today altogether. Multi-stakeholder platforms are a must. I do see that the ones that per sector seem to have more relevance, because you become very concrete if you have to implement this, and this concreteness can be very different per sector. And what I also see that works is to have some at the local level, so national or regional, linked to global, so that you have both levels or even more levels. Sometimes it's country, region, international, and to make this link between them. I really think it works. Also, setting the objective of the multi-stakeholder platforms, it shouldn't be immediately like we have to do everything together. That doesn't work. The private sector there's too much at stake and there's too much competition, luckily, yeah, for many things, that this can work. But if the objective is to learn together and to see what the government can do to enable it, then it seems to work. So it might sound a bit light, but it creates trust, and this is what we need in the short term. And it creates also accountability to countries. Like, hey, we need you too. Huh? If you don't move, then it's very difficult for us to move and to comply, and so to remain here. I'll go quickly to one that is very much being discussed, but also that is very much critically discussed at the Commission's level. So that's the declaration in excess. In the frequently asked questions of December, we all at once saw very explicitly, you can't do a declaration in excess. What is a declaration in excess? And I don't call it territorial, and you will see why if we go to the next slide. A declaration in excess means that you say, my product, you can go to the next slide maybe, Emese, yeah. My product comes from a group of plots, and I don't know exactly from which plot it comes, but it certainly comes from the plots that I note down here in my due diligence statement. So I gave you, for example, 100 geolocations or polygons from 100 plots, and you say, I'm sure it comes from one of these plots, and I've checked all of them for deforestation. So you give all the plots, and you say, and I hopefully you do, check them for deforestation, but you don't know exactly that the product in your shipment from which one of these plots it comes. So you can go lighter on the traceability aspect, which for some of the commodities or products is interesting because it becomes mixed, for example, very soon in the value chain, and you can't trace it back to the exact farm, to the exact plot. It's not even a farm anymore. But you need to define from which plots can it come. Yeah, and you need to give the geolocations of these plots and the polygons, and you have to ensure that you've checked them for deforestation. So on your list, you will have more polygons than from possibly where your product comes from, you know? But you need to check all of them for deforestation. So obviously, the operator takes also some more risk, because if there's a default, so if there's an error that some of these plots did deforest, then this operator will have to reject its shipment, yeah, and will have to go in negotiation to get a fine or not. But so you take a risk on more plots than probably the ones that contributed to your shipment, but you have less costs and trouble to have the exact traceability. Yeah, so if you say this product in my shipment, it can come from these 100 or 1,000 or million of plots, yeah, but I don't know of which one, but all are checked for deforestation, and the ones that deforested are out, yeah. I think that in reality, it's probably more practical to use this than it sounds at first sight, yeah. So here you see an example. You see farmers here with their hats on, and you see a sourcing line and a due diligence statement line, yeah. So it means that it's probably sourced only from some of these plots, but in your due diligence, you say you mention all of the plots. And you don't even know from how many of these farms this has been sourced. You don't even know it, yeah? But you know it's from some of these farms, and it's not from other farms. And all the ones that it could be coming from, you put in your due diligence statement, yeah? So what it's not, and we go to the next slide, what it is not is that you say, I've checked I've made one big polygon of all the plots and all the farms in a cooperative or in a group, and I give that one big polygon. You know, so that would be a real territorial or almost landscape approach. Yeah? So it's not that. You still have to identify all the individual plots and give them in your due diligence statement as a separate polygon or geolocation, and you must assure of all of them that they haven't deforested. You know? So that is a line that may not be crossed Yeah, so that's why I don't like to use the word territorial anymore, because you think of a territory, but in fact it's plots within the territory. But you can make your traceability easier, cheaper, and maybe even more realistic, because in the end it's very difficult to say which plot. Certainly if you work with smallholders, with products that are mixed very soon in the value chain, did it now come from this farmer or this farmer? Sometimes it's an incentive even to have fraud, because they don't know from which farmer.
Apologies, Hannelore. I have to ask you to please speed up
okay.
a bit, because we have another presentation. I'm concerned of
Yes,
time. Thank
so
you.
and another lessons learned is that we're probably heading for a phased approach. That you first say, okay, we have a declaration in excess and we work on further traceability later. Yeah, that's something that we see happening. There's a lot of new initiatives on digital public infrastructure. What do they mean? It's free for access codes, joint databases, at a local, global, international level. There's a lot of overlap in these initiatives, and we also don't have the guarantee that the private sector wants to use these systems. So I think eyes open. It covers also very different things. It covers digital infrastructure, which can be used by different, so it's a digital road. We also see that it's sometimes about standards, it's about joint free use tools, which is all, but it's different. Shared maps, so this is different. So I think it's the private sector have a look at what is existing, what is coming, and is there anything we're interested in. Legality aspects, what I hear from the Commission is that there is a difference in saying you have to be compliant to the national law. That's one thing, which is not written in the EUDR. The EUDR says it has to be in accordance with the national regulations. And this would mean that you need to know from the national government, what are your regulations? So clarity on your regulations. Are they enforced or not? And what are your plans on enforcement? So it doesn't mean that the trader can be kept responsible where this coffee comes from a farmer that didn't comply with the national regulation, because the trader can't directly influence it. But together we would need to do an exercise with the governments that they're clear on it, and clear on the plans, and that we're all informed about that. Good. The role of the governments of producing countries, it is not clear and it's different per context. So, but there's a lessons learned that this discussion needs to happen very clearly, and preferably before the legislations go into application or even into force. Good. Let's go to the next slide. I think it's just an aspect that has been completely forgotten, and that's coming up now very strongly. There's several ongoing studies and mappings. There's some impact studies also by the Commission that are starting today. So before what was written in the EUDR, it's DG INTPA, International Partnerships, starting impact studies now already. In the EUDR, it only comes, the reviews of the impact on smallholders only come after 5 years. So that's DG Environment. DG INTPA is starting some already. There's several mappings that take place of services for compliance for cocoa and coffee. We have these tables of what service providers are around and what exactly do they offer, very different. For coffee, we also made one big global database on all the coffee projects, more than 400, public and private, which are accessible via a web app on the ICO, that's the International Coffee Organization's website. The cost of traceability will be looked into by the International Cocoa Organization, but also by co-leads financed by the EU. There's also an interesting exercise being done by the Digital Future Coffee on the confusion of roles for the implementation of EUDR. And then to the last slide, Emese, we're almost there. There's a regional learning community in Central America to which you can join. You can send me a mail, and Emese can, if you don't find me, Emese can facilitate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There's so much to be discussed. I know we never have enough time, but just to quickly continue with George. George is a traceability manager at ISEAL. He leads a work stream at ISEAL supporting sustainability systems, responding to the growing regulatory need for more traceable supply chains. He previously worked at Better Cotton, another ISEAL community member, where he managed the technical development of the new chain of custody standard and a verification system for physical Better Cotton. And Josh, the word is yours. Thank you so
Brilliant.
much.
Thank you, and thank you for having me here. So just quickly before I jump into an overview of what some sustainability systems are doing and adapting to EUDR, just a quick intro to ISEAL. So we're a global membership organization for credible sustainability systems, and we work with schemes to challenge and support them to deliver greater impact. Our members include a lot of the leading voluntary sustainability systems across commodities and sectors. On the topic of EUDR, we've been working with our members since the announcement of EUDR to share and to track developments, and now we're kicking things up a gear as we're heading towards implementation. If we move to the next slide. Brilliant, thank you. So when it comes to the role of third-party verification systems in EUDR, it's important to again remember that there isn't a green lane for certified materials entering into Europe. Operators and traders still need to do due diligence on materials. However, there is recognition within the FAQ and within kind of communications from the Commission that there's a role for third-party verification systems to play in providing evidence to inform risk assessments and to demonstrate compliance with the regulation. We're also already seeing competent authorities making reference to certification systems in their own guidance to operators. The big caveat here in terms of using certification systems for this purpose is that you need to have trust that the system is aligned to EUDR and to have trust in the data and assurance that it provides. So in terms of what to think about there, it's good to think about the normative frameworks. So whether the definitions that they use within their standards, that they match those definitions that are used within the regulation, such as definitions for deforestation, cutoff points, requirements around land use change and conversion. When it comes to implementation, it's important to understand what level of verification is occurring in the field, in the supply chain, on data that's received. And then when it comes to the credibility of the initiatives, it's important to consider how the system is governed, how transparent it is about its processes, and how stakeholders are involved and engaged in decision-making. If we move to the next slide, please. Brilliant, thank you. So we've seen across the board a big uptick in adaptation and innovation among schemes affected by EUDR, really with the emphasis on supporting certified entities comply with the regulation as much as the schemes can. So many of the schemes within our community were already making big investment in upgrading their systems to improve how data was collected, processed and verified and shared, and EUDR has really accelerated this process. I've put some examples in this slide. If we go to the next slide, I can give you just an overview of the key trends that we're seeing within our membership. So the first is that schemes are aligning their definitions and normative requirements to the definitions and to kind of the expectations that are set within EUDR. The second is that schemes are really strengthening how they are collecting geolocation data from certified entities and also looking at how that land plot data is verified as well. We're seeing trends of schemes starting to share risk data with certified entities to inform operator and trader risk assessments. And we're even seeing collaborations across certification schemes and sustainability initiatives to share risk data between them to inform more consistent risk assessments. And that's an exciting development that we hope to see more of in the future. On the topic of data sharing, a lot of schemes are putting a lot of focus and attention into embedding responsible data sharing governance and practices within their system and trying to make sure that data that is provided by producers, including critical and sensitive information, like geolocation data, remains in ownership of the producer and that they have control over how it's shared and how it's used. And then finally, in terms of responses, we're seeing a big uptick in change in how schemes are approaching chain of custody and kind of investment in traceability solutions and offerings as well. If we go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I think, as Hannelore said, there is a lot where we still need clarity before we can proceed. As ISEAL, we have been kind of developing different technical submissions to the Commission to inform the revision of their FAQs and also the guidance that's forthcoming. I was attending the multi-stakeholder platform today, and they said that version 3 of the FAQs is going to be released in May, so imminently, while the anticipated guidance will be by the middle of the year, so expect that to be around June. In terms of what the guidance that we've provided, the first set was around credibility criteria for evaluating third-party certification systems, and we really drew on our own expertise and experience in defining credibility for schemes to design that. The second area of guidance and kind of suggestions that we provided related to issues that will affect implementation. The first being around the need for consistency in how operators collect and conduct their own risk assessments. You know, the more aligned that we can be in the data that we're asking from the supply chain, the more aligned we are in how we conduct risk assessments, then the more practical this will be to implement. And particularly for traders who will need to have confidence in the due diligence statements of operators that they source from. The second was around reporting in excess, and Hannelore has covered that as well. And then the third is around mass balance systems and clarifying their role with respect to EUDR. And that's particularly around whether mass balance is itself an issue, as defined by the FAQs, or if it's more about mass balance systems that allow the uncontrolled mixing of known and unknown origins. Because there are many examples from different sustainability systems where there are additional controls in place on what can be mixed with certified materials in a mass balance system. And we'll be working on that topic more with our members in the coming months. And with that, I'll hand back to Emese, and we might even have time for a question or two before we wrap up. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being so quick at the end. And yeah, we're perfectly on time. I see that we are answering the questions actually as they come in. So I don't see any question unanswered. So thank you also, Hannelore, for your support on that and answering the questions. We will share the slides and the recording. And as yeah, both of them mentioned, there are a lot of pending issues and question marks, but a lot is happening. So that is why we organize this webinar today, to have a follow-up to the last year's webinar, because there's simply so much going on. And I would like to really thank our fantastic speakers today, Hannelore and George, for providing your insights, experience from the ground, from the policy side of things. It was really interesting and a deep dive into recent developments and also questions and open topics. Thank you so much. Yeah, we're perfectly at the hour. And if we will have a look at the chat. If there are any questions that remained unanswered, we will reach out to you, everyone, directly. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for the support, and we stay in touch and yeah, keep everyone well informed on also in the next upcoming interesting months. Thank you, everyone. Take care.